On 5 News tonight, Nigel Farage quits as UKIP leader, Chris Evans quits as Top Gear host, and NASA's Jupiter mission reaches a critical phase. Nigel Farage says he's done his bit getting the UK out of the European Union.
During the referendum campaign, I said, I want my country back. And what I'm saying today is I want my life back. And it begins right now. Thank you.
Whilst in another shock resignation, Chris Evans says he's given it his best shot as Top Gear presenter, but it wasn't enough. And could this probe unearth the secrets of our solar system's biggest planet and the Earth itself? Also tonight, as an inquest rules schoolgirl Alice Gross was unlawfully killed, her family calls for tougher controls on foreign criminals coming into Britain.
We believe that had such measures been in place, Alice's death might have been prevented.
And after a lifetime trapped by silence, a breakthrough for the boy whose parents refused to give up hope. Hello and welcome to 5 News Tonight. I'm Danny Sinha. The EU referendum has had many political casualties, but today saw the shock resignation of a man who spent 2 decades fighting to get Britain out of Europe. Nigel Farage quit as UKIP's leader, saying he's done his bit and now he wants his life back. Last time he stepped down, though, as the party's leader, he reversed his decision, but he's told us this time it will stick. Well, he is the second leading Brexit campaigner to step out of the limelight after Boris Johnson said he wasn't standing for the Conservative Party leadership last week. Here's our political editor, Andy Bell.
His whole career has been devoted to getting Britain out of the EU, so on one level, what was about to happen should not have been a surprise.
I couldn't possibly achieve more than we managed to get in that referendum, and so I feel it's right that I should now stand aside as leader of UKIP. During the referendum campaign, I said, I want my country back. And what I'm saying today is I want my life back. And it begins right now. Thank you.
He did resign after last year's general election, though, so...
You have stepped down before, famously, and returned. How can we be sure that won't happen again?
I was persuaded to come back for one reason, and that was to fight this referendum. And I'm very pleased I changed my mind just over a year ago and came back and fought this referendum. I won't be changing my mind again, I can promise you.
It's over 20 years since he first stood in a by-election.
The message that the UK Independence Party is giving is a message that has been given on behalf of the British people.
He missed out then, but he made it to the European Parliament, where he established his own style.
Ask yourself a question. Would you buy a used car from this commission?
He had his own style campaigning too, as he tried and failed several times to become an MP. In 2010, he nearly died when the plane he was flying in crashed on election day. But he finally had his moment with the referendum.
Let June the 23rd go down in our history as our Independence Day!
But this was the way UKIP's only MP greeted today's news. And Douglas Carswell told me later he rejected his own party's campaign.
Vote Leave won not because Vote Leave campaigned as an extension of UKIP. On the contrary, it ran as a repudiation of that angry nativism. It ran as a generous campaign.
So Leave won in spite of Nigel Farage, is that what you're saying?
You could put it that way, but I don't want to be unkind or ungenerous on the day of Nigel's departure.
And UKIP watchers say the party's future now depends on how Britain pulls out of Europe.
If that negotiation fails to deliver fundamental reform of things like free movement and immigration, then there will be significant potential for UKIP in the future.
He stays a member of the European Parliament, and we probably haven't heard the last of him, but we should be hearing a bit less. Andy Bell, 5 News.
Well, Peter Whittle is a London Assembly member for UKIP and was the party's candidate for London Mayor. Good to have you with us this evening, Mr. Whittle.
Hi.
First of all, do you believe he's actually gone this time?
I think so. Very sadly, Nigel was the reason that I came into the party about 3.5 years ago. I'm sure it's the reason that many people joined the party, and certainly the reason that millions of people voted. But of course, I mean, you know, there is this saying, isn't there, that all political careers end in failure. Well, Nigel has bucked that trend because this has ended on such a high note of extraordinary success. And, you know, he's been doing this, as you say in your report, for over 20 years. He wanted to get a referendum, but he's not only got the referendum, we also have come out of the EU. I mean, an extraordinary way to go out. But on a personal level, of course, I shall miss him terribly.
You obviously campaigned, of course, when you were running for London Mayor with Mr Farage. I mean, he is the reason why you joined UKIP, and for many, he is a big personality. I mean, now he's gone, what happens next?
Well, I mean, the thing is that we're in an incredibly strong position now. I mean, we're in a very sound financial position at the moment. And of course, you know, we've had this extraordinary result which we campaigned for, that's happened with the referendum. A glorious event, really, in the history of our country. Huge opportunities going forward. And in terms of UKIP, obviously we did a huge amount of the ground campaigning, particularly in the north part of England, which we saw so many people coming over to the Brexit campaign, particularly Labour supporters. And I think that really now we are in such a strong position. And when you look at the disarray which is taking place in the other parties, and particularly in the Labour Party, then in some ways I think that there is the chance for us to be the real opposition. And, you know, come to 2020 and the general election there, I think be very, very interesting times.
You say you're in a strong position, but your lead donor of UKIP has actually defected. They're giving their support now to Andrea Letson, who, of course, today has launched their own campaign to run for Conservative leader. That could change things for you, couldn't it?
Well, remember that if you're talking about Aaron Banks, I mean, he's his own man, and he gives money to whoever he wants. Indeed, he's given money to us. But I think the point is that, which I think is the most important point of all, is that he wants to, and I want to support people who are going to be going forward, leading the negotiations, who want Brexit, who want to come out of the EU, not people who were Remainers or reluctant Brexiteers and all the rest of it. You need people who are very passionate about this and simply aren't going to just be backed into doing it. So I would support anyone who was a Brexiteer. We need to get an exceptionally good deal from the EU, and we've got to make every chance and all the opportunities that are coming our way.
Who should be your next leader, though? Douglas Carswell is your only MP. I mean, do you think he should be a contender?
I think that Douglas has ruled himself out. I think that's a very good thing if he has. I think that his remark or his response today to Nigel going was, should we say, ungracious and rather petty, rather juvenile. So, frankly, I think that that's no great loss. Look, I mean, over the coming week, obviously, we've got a lot of talented people in UKIP, a lot of talented people, and they're going to be taking soundings, as the phrase goes, and looking at what they might do. And then, of course, you know, we will have the proper leadership election going forward. I think that it's all got to be done really in time for the party conference in September.
Peter Whittle, thank you very much for talking to us.
Pleasure.
Well, as you've heard there, Andrea Letson has officially launched her bid for Conservative leader today. The Energy Minister said her decision to stand was based on her absolute conviction that the country's future will be better outside the EU. But she did promise EU nationals already living here that they could stay, in contrast to Theresa May's statement that they would be part of the negotiations.
I commit today to guaranteeing the rights of our EU friends who have already come here to live and work. We must give them certainty. There is no way they will be bargaining chips in our negotiations.
George Osborne has announced plans to slash corporation tax to encourage businesses to continue investing in the UK post-Brexit. The Chancellor is planning to reduce the rate to below 15%, some 5% lower than its current rate. And Jeremy Corbyn has hit back at rebel Labour MPs, calling for him to resign. The Labour leader urged party members to unite against the Conservatives and insists it's his responsibility to carry on as leader. Now, if you're struggling to keep up with all the resignations from politics, well, here's one from the world of entertainment. Chris Evans is standing down as host of BBC Two's Top Gear programme, saying he'd given it his best shot, but sometimes that's not enough. Well, ratings have been falling and some viewers have been critical. It's not known what will happen to the show now, as Catherine Jones reports.
I'm in my happy place.
You're in your happy place.
Last night, the final episode of the latest series of Top Gear aired. The first series fronted by Chris Evans, and now we learn the only one he'll appear in.
To actually drive.
This afternoon, the presenter announced via Twitter, stepping down from Top Gear. Gave it my best shot, but sometimes that's not enough. The team are beyond brilliant, he added. I wish them all the best. The new look show careered into controversy before it reached the screen when co-host Matt LeBlanc performed stunts near the Cenotaph in London. Chris Evans had to publicly apologise.
The images show are terrible. They look so disrespectful. There are mitigating circumstances, but absolutely no. Unreservedly apologise. You know, I saw the images this morning for the first time, and I felt the same way as everybody else. That footage will definitely not go on there, no question about it.
Rumours of a rift between Evans and LeBlanc have since fuelled unwelcome headlines. And the ratings have collapsed, from 6 million watching the first episode to fewer than 2 million tuning in to see Chris review classic cars last night.
Massively uprated on a break!
Which of us presenters could go the longest?
Love a presenters contest.
The BBC says Chris Evans will continue to present his breakfast show on Radio 2, while the next series of Top Gear will be filmed with the remaining presenters and without hiring a replacement. Catherine Jones, 5 News.
Well, with me to discuss Top Gear's future is the original Stig, Perry McCarthy, and TV critic Kevin O'Sullivan. Good to have you with us, gentlemen, this evening. Kevin, first of all, the show, it's been criticised from the start. You know, social media's been rife with lots of criticism, and it suffered its worst ratings. I mean, what's been the problem here?
Yeah, last night's overnight figures were 1.9 million, which is the lowest of all time for any Top Gear ever. And that is pretty catastrophic. The sad truth is that Chris has said today to have felt that he was a square peg in a round hole, and I think that's a fair description. He's a brilliant broadcaster, a fantastic live broadcaster, probably the best around, but he just didn't work on this show. He seemed uncomfortable. Viewers complained that he shouted all the time. To be honest with you, it looked very nice, but the script was pretty witless. So this new version was like the old version without the laughs, and it paid the price, really.
Perry, you've worked on the show. You know how personalities are hugely important in these sort of things. There was some talk that Matt LeBlanc and him were not getting on. That can matter, can't it?
Well, sure. I mean, you look at the key thing about the last shows, which is the relationship between James and Richard and Jeremy, and that was, you know, what people really loved, all that banter and their knowledge of cars. But I can't really say anything about Matt and Chris's relationship because I've not been working with them on it, so I just don't know.
So the chemistry may not have been there, but of course, let's talk about the formula, because it was quite identical to what the other guys used to do as well.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I feel personally that Top Gear had a super opportunity with Chris coming in to head it up, and the first show for me was going to be critical, and I think their biggest problem was they got it so wrong. The first show, I feel, it's my own opinion, was a disaster.
That was the Blackpool trip. It was terrible.
Was it?
In the three-wheel Cup. Yeah, the first show was very bad. I agree with Perry. Yeah. But on the format, you're right. The format was rigidly identical to the Clarkson format, and you know why they did that, so they could sell it to countries that don't speak English and they wouldn't notice the difference. But that meant that we in Britain just made stark comparisons. We weren't asked to make a comparison, we were demanded to, and Chris's version just came up wanting. It wasn't very good.
Viewers are also very fickle, aren't they? And there's only so long they'll give a programme to bed in, if you like.
Well, the funny thing is that the shows after the first show have got an awful lot better. And so what amazes me is that the big comeback that everybody was expecting was so bad, and unfortunately, that was their key chance. That was the killing fields to keep everybody on board, silence the critics, and keep going. That was bad, it turned people off. But the funny thing is the show has got an awful lot better across the last 5 episodes.
Kevin, you wanted to...
You'll never silence the critics. But the problem was that, as you rightly said earlier, the old show, Clarkson's show, had attitude and it had a certain sense of humour.
Chemistry as well, wasn't it?
It had chemistry. It wasn't politically correct. This new show has no attitude. It lacks identity. It's terribly politically correct. In fact, for its fans, it's basically lost everything, and that's where it's gone wrong.
And
so
of course, their new programme is to launch in the autumn. I mean, will viewers be loyal to them?
Well, I think it will get good ratings in terms of Amazon Prime, but it's a very different market, and it's going for the global kind of arena, and I'm sure it'll be great, but it won't get the numbers that Top Gear did in the past.
Good to speak to you, Kevin Perry. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Danny.
3 former Barclays employees have been found guilty of rigging the interest rate used by banks to set the price of financial products. Jay Merchant, Jonathan Matthew and Alex Paybon were found guilty of manipulating the LIBOR rate between 2005 and 2007. They'll be sentenced on Thursday. Now, the family of a murdered teenager have called for tougher controls to stop foreign criminals entering the UK. Alice Gross was murdered in London by a Latvian builder who'd been convicted of killing his wife in his home country. Well, the schoolgirl's family said they miss their beautiful, loving daughter every day. Charlotte Grant reports.
It's nearly 2 years since Alice Gross died. Ever since then, her family have had so many questions. Today, for the first time, they heard some answers after an inquest jury ruled Alice was unlawfully killed in a sexually motivated attack.
I still find it almost impossible to believe that our lovely daughter has been so brutally taken from us. I miss her every moment of every day. I have needed to find out as much as I can about how it is possible that she could have been killed in such a horrific way.
This is the last time the 14-year-old was seen alive on a towpath near her home in West London. But caught on CCTV minutes later, the man who would become the police's prime suspect. Anna Solkans was a Latvian builder and a convicted murderer. Before coming to Britain, he'd served a 7-year sentence for killing his wife in his home country. But the truth only unravelled in the weeks it took police to find Alice's body. Then the questions followed, how Zolkans could enter Britain with a conviction and how police still weren't aware of his past when he was arrested in 2009 for an alleged attack on another teenage girl. Zolkans took his own life before police could arrest him. Today the coroner said she will raise concerns with the Home Office and the police over checks on foreign nationals entering the UK.
Our concern has been to ensure that there are fair and proportionate rules governing the movement of serious criminals within Europe, whether that is a Latvian coming to the UK or a dangerous UK citizen travelling abroad. We believe that had such measures been in place, Alice's death might have been prevented.
The coroner described Alice as hugely talented. The police say it is now their policy to check the background of foreign nationals they arrest. Alice's family want thorough and fair immigration checks to be the teenager's legacy. Charlotte Grant, 5 News.
Coming up on 5 News tonight, we're live in Baghdad as anger grows over the bombing that killed 165 people. After a lifetime trapped by silence, a breakthrough for the boy whose parents refused to give up hope.
To be able to talk to him properly, ask him anything, and for him to be able to talk to us back for the first time, age 9, to talk to your son. It was beautiful.
And mission to Jupiter, the NASA probe that could tell us how our solar system was formed. We'll see you after the break. Welcome back. You're watching 5 News Tonight. The Iraqi government has declared 3 days of national mourning after a huge bomb in Baghdad killed at least 165 people and injured hundreds more. Funerals have begun after yesterday's devastating attack, which was the worst single bombing in more than a decade of war. A lorry packed with explosives was detonated as families were out shopping for the celebration that marks the end of Ramadan. Well, so-called Islamic State has claimed responsibility for that attack. Well, we can speak to CNN reporter Ben Wiedemann live from Baghdad. And Ben, growing anger that the Iraqi government really haven't prevented this attack from happening.
That's right. In fact, people had been told that after Fallujah fell to the government that this sort of attack wouldn't happen again. And of course it did late Saturday night. There's anger at the fact that security in the capital doesn't seem to be up to snuff. And there's also anger about the continued use by the Iraqi government and private security firms of these bomb detecting devices that I believe were made by a company owned by James McCormick, a UK national. These were found to be absolutely useless, but when you drive around Baghdad until quite recently, they were commonly used at various checkpoints, including apparently one of the checkpoints near where that bomb went off. Now, the Prime Minister, Haider al-Abadi, has ordered the immediate discontinuation of the use of those devices, but it's a little too late for 215 people. That's the current death toll for this blast on Saturday night in Baghdad.
Ben Wiedemann, thank you very much. Now, a story of hope and joy for a 10-year-old whose life has been trapped in silence. Diagnosed with cerebral palsy, Jonathan Bryan couldn't speak or walk, locked into his body. Well, doctors warned he may never recognise his family, but his mother was convinced he had a fully functioning mind, and as Dominic Reynolds now reports, her instincts were right.
Small talk takes a bit longer for Jonathan.
Welcome.
But it's remarkable he can do it at all. Born with cerebral palsy, he can't speak, walk or control much of his movement. The special school he was in thought he couldn't learn. But his brain has just been unlocked by his very persistent mum and by this board. And in his words, here's how life is different now.
Before I was like a bird in a cage, but now I am free and fly in the open air.
Worth waiting for, that answer.
Jonathan spells out words letter by letter using the thing he can control best, his eyes. And that's meant that a boy teachers thought would never be able to read now writes his own blog. As well as poems, there's a petition on it. He knows his time left is limited. He wants schools to aim higher for people like him.
What are your plans for the life ahead of you?
But before I leave, I would like to hear my petition discussed in Parliament.
All these plans would still be locked inside his head if his mum hadn't taught Jonathan to read by herself. His official diagnosis was profound and multiple learning difficulties. She defied it, and she thinks other mums should too.
Not to be inhibited and held back by this label, or by any label. It's not just PMLD that I think you hear people saying a child's too something or other to be able to read, too autistic, too this, too that, too the other. And actually I think we need to be more ambitious for these children and really, really try to help them to read and write. It's transformational for him.
Jonathan now goes to a mainstream school and his reading age is ahead of most of his classmates. He's living a life which was once out of his reach. But Jonathan put it better. He's flying. Dominic Reynolds, 5 News.
Now this afternoon, a space mission devised 15 years ago and launched 5 years ago has reached a critical point. A NASA probe called Juno is about to enter Jupiter's orbit. Its aim, though, to find out more about the solar system's biggest planet and give us more clues about how our planet actually formed. Well, Juno's travelled more than 1.5 billion miles at speeds of over 23,000 miles an hour. Tonight, though, it will be deploying its brakes using an engine made in Britain so it can be captured perfectly by the planet's gravity. It will then spend 18 months in Jupiter's orbit, finding out what exactly it's made of.
After more than 15 years, we're finally arriving there. It's incredibly exciting. This is a great journey. And as you can tell, it is not easy for NASA to get the answers that humanity's seeking here.
Well, with me is space journalist Sarah Cruddas. And Sarah, it's been a huge challenge even getting into this point, hasn't it?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we don't know that much about our solar system. I think there's sometimes an assumption with science that we've been there and we've done that, but we've never actually sent a probe to Jupiter, which is actually orbited around the poles, which is what the Juno space probe's trying to do. So it's had quite an epic journey across the solar system. It's a solar panel spacecraft the size of 3 tractors, about the size of 3 baseball pitch in total. And it's had this long 5-year journey across our solar system, orbiting around the Earth to get more energy. And now we're arriving at Jupiter. We've just passed one of the inner moons of Jupiter, and we're about to fire the brakes to actually slow down and be captured by Jupiter's orbit. And that's a really crucial point in the mission, because if you brake too long, you could skip off and actually miss the orbit, and brake too short, you could actually crash into Jupiter. And on top of that, it takes around 48 minutes to actually communicate with the space probe. So when that braking's happening tonight, it will take 48 minutes before we realise if it's been a success or not.
So why are scientists, first of all, interested in Jupiter? We know it's one of the biggest planets, but what is this probe, which we know is called Juno, what is it trying to actually find? What data will it bring back?
Well, Jupiter's hugely important for science. It's another clue in the jigsaw puzzle of how our solar system came to be and how we came to be here on Earth. So Jupiter's the biggest planet in our solar system. It's this big gas giant. You could fit everything else apart from the sun inside Jupiter twice over. It's that massive. And by learning more about Jupiter, which we think formed before all the other planets, we can actually find out more about how other planets formed as well, including our own Earth. And one exciting thing about Jupiter is it's actually so big. If it was much bigger, it could be like a star. So it gives us this next clue in how our solar system came to be.
OK, and it's red spot, really iconic of Jupiter. We want to know more about that, really, don't we?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the probe is actually going to be getting the closest we've ever got to Jupiter before. So it's going to be cruising around 3,200 kilometres above the cloud tops. I mean, the red spot, as you can see there, has got wind speeds of up to 500-600 kilometres an hour. It's this colossal storm, which is around the size of 2 Earths. And Jupiter's a really exciting place. It's a stormy place. We don't quite know exactly what it's made of. And we've also got quite a few exciting moons for Jupiter as well, which we're going to find more out about as well.
So we're running out of time, but quickly, before we started chatting, you told me we can actually see Jupiter tonight.
Yeah,
I wasn't aware of that.
That's correct, and I think that's amazing because that gives a sense of perspective. So actually, if you look west in the night sky around 9-10 o'clock, the brightest thing you can see is actually Jupiter. It's a star-like object that you can see if you look west in the night sky.
And it's perfectly safe to do.
Yeah, and just very, very quickly, there's 3 special guests on board, 3 Lego figures.
Stop you now, Sarah. Thank you very much. We'll look out for Jupiter tonight. That's all from us. We'll see you later on. Bye-bye. Have a lovely evening.